Welcome to another insightful story. Kindly like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Buatima sat on a couch in her house, with her life crumbling around her. It had been only 3 days since her beloved husband, Samuel, passed away, leaving her in grief. Her family surrounded her, murmuring words of comfort, but she sobbed uncontrollably. Suddenly, the air shifted. A woman entered the room, her perfume leaving a trail of freshness behind her. Buatima lifted her tear-streaked face in curiosity and saw a woman wearing a sleek black dress with a black fascinator standing with a regal posture. By her side was Samuel's older brother, Jose, his expression unreadable. Buatima looked intently and recognized her as Bridget. Bridget stood there in confidence and shouted, "Imposter," pointing at Buatima. "I am the real widow." Everybody looked at her surprised. The people around started to gasp as they murmured in disbelief. Unfazed, Bridget pulled out a marriage certificate. She trusted it on the floor. A woman picked it up and confirmed it bears Samuel's and Bridget's name. Confusion ensued. To settle this, the family went to the assembly for clarification. A man certified that the certificate was genuine, and as by law, Bridget is Samuel's wife. The family called an emergency meeting with Buatima and Bridget present. They broke into a disagreement, with some rallying behind Buatima as the one they recognized as the wife, while Osei and his faction insisted the law was clear. Bridget was Samuel's wife. Tempers flared. The two parties broke into a fist fight. Amid the pandemonium, Buatima stood there in shock. She felt as though her spirit was leaving her body. She couldn't believe all this was real. Her mind reeled, unraveling their story. Samuel Jesse was a handsome and brilliant teacher who was first posted to a village called Asempa. It was there he first laid eyes on Ama Buatima, a simple, talented, and hard-working hairdresser. It was love at first sight. To Buatima, Samuel was the perfect and ideal dream man. She would often meet him secretly, enjoying fun and romantic moments together. 4 months later, Buatima came home with her ecstasy palpable. She revealed to her mother that she had secretly been seeing Samuel, who just proposed. Her mother, Asabia, was astonished. "You are just 21, so why the rush?" she asked as she slowly recovered from her shock. Buatima expressed how wonderful Sam was, and how sure she was that he was the love of her life. "I cannot live without him, Mama," she exclaimed. But Asabia vehemently opposed, saying she should take time to know him. She threatened to elope if her mother refused to bless the union. Reluctantly, Asabia gave her blessing, praying their love would weather life's storms. Their traditional marriage was a joyous celebration. Villagers danced and sang, hailing their union as the epitome of love, but life soon tested their bond. 2 years later, one night, As they sat under the bright sky, enjoying the breeze while watching the stars, Sam spoke softly. "My love," his voice filled with sadness. Fatima stood up, with her voice trembling. "Is everything okay?" Sam held her hand and took a deep breath. He suggested she permit him to move to the city in search of a better life for them. Fatima initially disagreed, arguing that they've not been married for long, so such physical distance can be detrimental. Nonetheless, she agreed. The night before his departure was long and sad, with both filled with sadness and unspoken fears. In the city, Samuel worked tirelessly, taking on extra menial jobs to save for their future. To sustain their love, they exchanged letters weekly, updating each other about their lives while expressing their longing. Years later, Sam returned to the village. They were both elated to see each other. They talked the whole night. Sam then shared some good news. "I will be going abroad," he said. Fatima was so happy, but he sighed. "I have to fake a marriage with someone too." He explained further that he had met a woman in the city called Bridget, who returned from abroad and promised to send him there. But they had to pretend to be in love and marry at a court. Fatima had a mixed feeling upon hearing the news. She agreed, trusting Samuel's assurances that it were a mere formality. At abroad, he would often send her money and letters, both promising to be faithful to each other regardless of distance. It had been 10 years, but Samuel could not return home due to financial and job insecurity. One day, he called home. Fatima was so happy to hear from him, but his voice was filled with sadness. "My love," he said as he sobbed. "Are you all right?" Fatima asked with concern. He confessed he had gotten drunk one day with Bridget and accidentally slept together, and now Bridget is pregnant. He begged fervently, swearing it was a one-time mistake and that he had clung faithfully to his promise. The news devastated Fatima. Her body trembling, her worst fears had come true. She left the telephone and ran off crying. At home, she refused to eat and drink for days, with her nights consumed by tears. Asabia tried to console her, but her heart was shattered into pieces. Days later, as her grief subsided, Asabia suggested she end the marriage, since the marriage has been nothing but a lost venture on her part. That night, Fatima contemplated on what her mother had said, but the thought of losing Sam felt like the end of her life. She received letters from Sam filled with heartfelt apologies. She forgave him, hoping to rebuild what they had. 2 years later, Sam came back to Ghana for the first time. Fatima's heart was filled with joy to see him. He surprised her with a house he was secretly building that was supervised by his older brother, Osei. He assured her that his arrangement with Bridget was over as he had moved out of her apartment. He showed her photos of their beautiful baby girl, Fatima, whom he had named after her. He expressed his sincere appreciation for all her love, kindness, and perseverance. That night, they held each other tightly, promising an undying love for each other. Their love rekindled, but the joy was short-lived. Samuel had to leave again, and their bittersweet parting left Mortimer yearning. After his first visit, he would return every year, spending his time in happiness with Mortimer, who had moved into his home. One day, Sam shared a bad news. He had been diagnosed with a terminal illness and wished to spend his last days at home with his lovely wife. He returned in the company of his brother, Osei. Mortimer embraced him, giving him a sense of hope. She cared for him, taking care of his feeding, medication, and hygiene as his illness got worse by the day. After a year, he passed on. Bridget's arrival after Samuel's death had brought everything to light. Sam had been deceiving her all this while. The weight of the revelation was too much for her. She fainted as they rushed her to the hospital. Osei stood nearby with his heart swelled with satisfaction. Everything was going as he expected. During Samuel's funeral rites, both Mortimer and Bridget were allowed to perform the widowhood rites. The family later gathered at a court to settle Samuel's estate, since he had died intestate. His properties were divided according to the Intestate Succession Law, PNDC Law 111. At the court, Amma heard the most shocking news of her life. She was not even a wife. The judge explained further that since Sam's marriage to Bridget was conducted under the ordinance, a strict monogamous union, it rendered his customary marriage to Mortimer invalid. Legally, she had no claim to his estate. She walked out of the court with a heavy heart. A year ago, she had closed her salon to care for her dying husband. And now, she had no husband, no child, and not even a property. Asabia held her tightly as they sat in a car on their way home. Upon their arrival, they saw her belongings being thrown out. There stood Osei, commanding people to bring all her things outside. Mortimer stood there speechless. Enraged, Asabia confronted him, but Osei declared that since she is not a wife, the family has decided she cannot stay in the house, so he is making the work easier by helping her move out. Mortimer broke down in tears. She couldn't take it anymore. Why? What did I ever do to you? She asked, sobbing. I never liked a low life like you for my brother. I've been waiting for the opportune time to let you know how much you disgust me. He sneered at Mortimer. Osei pushed her away and walked off. Mortimer fell to the ground, bruising her knee as tears streamed down her face. Asabia held her. Just say it. You told me so, Mama, she said, sobbing. Asabia held her hand, urging her to let them go back to the village and start over. How can I? I'm 44 years old, with nothing to my name, she said in agony. Despite her despair, she eventually returned to her village. Meanwhile, Bridget moved into Samuel's house, triumphant. She smiled as she surveyed her surroundings. Finally, she murmured, "I've had my revenge." Osei joined her, holding a glass of champagne. Together, they toasted their victory. "I honestly thought you guys had divorced," Osei asked in curiosity. She explained that she never signed the divorce papers since he failed to fully pay her off. Their unresolved issues had driven him to move out. Osei reminded her of their agreement to give him some of the properties. "Sure, it will all be yours," she said with a big smile. Back in the village, Boatima struggled to rebuild her life. She faced constant ridicule, returning home in tears most days. But Asabia remained her rock, encouraging her to push forward. One night, she sat on her bed. She picked the photo album of Sam and her. Going through it, her mind flooded with their memories. Anger engulfed her. She shredded the photos into pieces as her cries echoed the room. Exhausted, she lay on the bed as she rocked herself to sleep. She dreamt. She was standing in a corner of an empty dark room, alone. Sam came there. He tried pulling her, but she resisted. "Maybe I was selfish," he said in a sad tone. She chuckled in disbelief. "You are not just selfish, you are wicked, and I hate you with every fiber in me," she said with her voice filled with rage. She sprang up and found a note tucked inside the album in Samuel's handwriting. It read, "I am sorry for everything. You deserved better." A strange warmth filled her heart as a cold breeze brushed past her. Days later, Bridget received a call from her sister, who scolded her of her actions. "She stole my man," Bridget said in her defense. "She didn't steal anything. You knew he was married, yet you wanted him. You know you cannot force love. You should be ashamed of yourself. At least you have your daughter. She has nothing. Women should support each other, not tear each other down." Bridget was shaken by her sister's words and began to reflect. Days later, she visited Boatima to reconcile. "I'm sorry," Bridget said. "Let's put this behind us." During a meeting to finalize the transfer of part of the inheritance to Osei, instead, Bridget announced she was transferring half of the estate to Boatima. "What?" Osei exclaimed. "This isn't what we agreed on." "Unfortunately for you, you are not the only snake here," Bridget teased. Humiliated, Osei ran out of the house. Bridget and Boatima finalized the paperwork. As they sat together afterwards, they reminisced times with Samuel. "It's time to move on," they both said with a faint smile. A week later, Bridget left for abroad, while Boatima returned to the city. With her inheritance, she re-established her salon and focused on self-development. And so, they lived stronger and wiser ever after.